Hello, everybody. My name is Hashim Chowdhary. I am an alumni of the London School of Economics, where I studied politics and economics. Soon I'll be going into investment banking in the finance world. Name three ways you think Saudi Arabia differs to your home country. Firstly, in terms of its society and its economy, socially it's very conservative, it's religious and based on tribal and family ties, whereas economically it's largely driven by petroleum revenues and public sector spending. But I come from the UK. The UK is socially very permissive, very liberal. It's not very religious at all, and its economy is primarily driven by services and business. It's quite progressive, and as I said, not religious. There's also no history of tribes in the UK as there are in Saudi Arabia. Secondly, the language and the sort of weather and landscape. Obviously, it's a completely different language in Saudi Arabia, given the script is different and the alphabet is different, but also because the language holds some religious significance, being the language of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. Secondly, whereas English is has no real religious significance and is the de facto language of the world, the language of business. Secondly, the weather and the landscape. Saudi Arabia is a desert country. It's very, very warm and there's very little rainfall. As a result, historically, it's been a nomadic society where tribes often went around the Arabian Peninsula in order to find water, and that shaped the society as it is today. Whereas the UK is very rainy, it's very sedentary historically. Thirdly, the politics. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is constituted as a monarchy, with the Quran and the Sunnah as its constitution, whereas the UK is a constitutional monarchy and a liberal democracy with an unwritten constitution. What am I most worried about when visiting Saudi Arabia? Well, in the UK, there is a negative social perception about Saudi Arabia. It's often seen as being very insular and quite hostile to outsiders, given there was no real history of tourism outside of religious tourism until very recently. Now, I'm keen to discover Saudi Arabia and Saudis themselves for myself and not through the perception of the media, which often seeks to engender a certain point of view, and often by people who've never really been to Saudi Arabia. But I want to go there and discover Saudi Arabia and Saudis for myself. What am I most looking forward to about the trip? Well, Saudi Arabia is undergoing a huge transformation at the moment to become a modern economy and a regional power. And I'm really keen to speak to people and leaders behind this change to get some inspiration for me to help my country in the future and the common challenges that both of our countries face, and to strengthen relationships in the future between Saudi Arabia and the UK. It's not very often you see a country going through a total socio-economic transformation. And I want to understand how we can be part of that, how we can help Saudi Arabia achieve that vision, and also to understand the historical context of Saudi Arabia itself and the society and why it is the way it is today. And I think that level of understanding between people from very different parts of the world will only help to increase cooperation. Name 5 words off the top of your head that you associate with Saudi Arabia. Islam, Makkah and Medina, oil, the desert, and the royal family. What would I most like to know and learn on my visit? Firstly, the economic opportunities. I'd really like to understand more how Saudi Arabia is diversifying, how it's becoming a global investing powerhouse, as someone going into the world of finance and investment banking, how this can lead to greater economic opportunities between Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom, given London is one of the financial capitals of the world. Secondly, the social transformation. I really want to understand how it's balancing changing socially and developing socially without fully diluting its culture and its history and its traditions. Thirdly, I really want to get to know Saudis and the country for myself. I love understanding new people, new cultures that come from completely different parts of the world to me, and understanding the historical context of Saudi Arabia and why the country is constituted as it is today. And I think only benefits can come out of that cross-cultural understanding and exchange to increase cooperation between our two peoples. Where would I like to see myself in 5 to 10 years? I'd like to see myself initially in investment banking and then as a private equity investor in the future. What this requires is being able to invest in businesses, projects, and ideas with great potential, and also understanding business leaders. And as Saudi Arabia looks to undertake an economic transformation, I think it will be really important for Saudis to have contacts that understand them, but also that can identify these young future captains of industry. And I'll be able to hopefully do that given my future roles in investment banking and private equity. By year 10, I would really like to move into economic foreign policy. That is to say, I'd like to use my economic and financial background and skills gained from my work and from my degree, but then combine that with my cultural knowledge and cultural sensitivity gained from experiences like Gateway KSA to inform UK policy as someone who's already visited these countries. Because what's important in economic foreign policy is not just having an economic background, but also understanding the people and the countries that you're dealing with and you're looking to invest in and gain investment from. And I think combining those two things will be really important, and thus the Gateway KSA program is an excellent opportunity for me. Why am I applying to the Gateway KSA program? Well, first, I want to see Saudi Arabia at first hand and Saudis at first hand, and not through the medium of social media or news institutions in the West that often have a very biased view of Saudi Arabia, that have never really been to Saudi Arabia and discovered it. I want to see the side of Saudi Arabia that people rarely see. We hear of Saudi Arabia being the custodian of the two holy mosques, but I want to learn more about its people, its history, its development, its progress that lie behind that. Secondly, I want to interact with and understand the aspirations of Saudi youth. Saudi Arabia has a very young population and they will be key in transforming the country. And I'm really therefore keen to speak to young leaders like myself and future captains of industry in Saudi Arabia to see what they're doing to transform their country and how I can take inspiration from that. Thirdly, I want to see the 2030 vision at hand, to interact with leaders to understand the common challenges that face our two nations and get inspiration in solving them by looking at the Saudi experience in tackling these challenges, issues like regional inequality and spreading economic development, and see how we can tackle that in the UK. What can I bring to the Gateway KSA program? First of all, I bring the perspective of a Muslim who is from the West. I can both communicate to Muslims about Saudi Arabia beyond Islam and beyond the two holy sites, because Muslims, their experience of Saudi Arabia is often limited to Mecca and Medina, but I really want to understand what lies beyond that, into the hinterland of Saudi Arabia, and I'll be able to speak to them about what Saudi Arabia is really like beyond that. Often, their view of Saudi Arabia beyond Mecca and Medina is informed by Western media institutions and political institutions, and I want to be able to help to shape a new vision of Saudi Arabia through my personal experiences, but also to my non-Muslim network about what Saudi Arabia is really like beyond what we see in the media, because they won't have even visited Saudi Arabia on pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. They'll have no real understanding of Saudi Arabia, its tribal history, the real inner workings of Saudi Arabia. And I think this opportunity will give me the chance to explain to Muslims and non-Muslims alike what Saudi Arabia is really like. Secondly, I have a social science background. I studied politics and economics, and I think this gives me a good grounding to understand the socio-economic transformation that's taking place in Saudi Arabia and how we in the UK can cooperate both economically and politically to help Saudi Arabia achieve these aims. Thirdly, I'm going into investment banking and hopefully thereafter private equity. Now, given Saudi Arabia's vision to become a global investment powerhouse, having individuals in the finance world, in a financial capital like London, such as myself, having individuals that understand the country, have visited the country, will be essential in helping Saudi Arabia achieve that vision, and having contacts in financial capitals like London that fully understand them and their background and their culture and history. How will I carry forward my experience in Saudi after the program is over and I've returned to my friends and family? Well, most of my family have only visited Saudi Arabia on Umrah and the Hajj. I'll be able to tell them about what lies beyond the non-religious aspects of Saudi Arabia. Now, most Muslims that I know and in my family and friends want Saudi Arabia to be stable, to be successful, to be prosperous, because it's the custodian of the two holy mosques. So I can really communicate to them the transformation that Saudi Arabia is undergoing and how we can help Saudi Arabia achieve that transformation, how we can help Saudi Arabia develop and progress, because we all want to see a stable and progressing Saudi Arabia. With my friends, most of them only know Saudi Arabia, like I said previously, from the perspective of the media, but I'll be able to share with them my first-hand experience of seeing and interacting with Saudis. And being able to communicate to them the historical and regional context in which Saudi Arabia actually operates, help them better understand why Saudi Arabia is the way it is today, the role it plays in the region, and therefore, whilst it may be very different to us, that doesn't mean to say that it's wrong or it's bad. And I think many people need to be able to hear that, given that they've never been to Saudi Arabia. And bettering those cross-cultural relations will only strengthen future relations between our two countries. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I really hope to be on the program.